Hey, welcome back to the Spector Creative channel, and today I want to talk about target costing and how it relates to the toy industry. And no, I don't mean how do you cost out a product to sell at Target stores. That has nothing to do with it. Target costing is part of economics, and it's how companies, any company, sets their prices for products they're going to sell at retail in order for that company to make the required amount of profit. That's how companies stay in business, right? We can't just give the stuff away for free. And specifically, how does target costing affect action figure collecting? Well, let's take a look. So here is a perfect example. This is Masters of the Universe Classics Stinkor, figure I worked on when I was at Mattel. Now, originally, he had a lot more deco, especially on his weapons, his shield and his gun. And when fans got the figure, they realized, oh, those weapons look kind of cheap because they've got no paint ops. It's because the paint ops had to be removed in order to get Stinkor at a target cost. Another example is this Star Wars Legacy Collection Obi-Wan, not a figure I worked on, but one that I collected. So when this figure was first shown off, I believe at San Diego Comic-Con at a fan panel, could be wrong, could have been a different one, but I remember very specifically he was shown that he was going to come with a table base with Princess Leia hologram on it. And then it was announced after this was shown that they couldn't afford it because it was overcost. And then it turned out that it was already costed in, and the brand managers were wrong, and it was going to be included. Okay, so what is up with this? How in the world does costing do this, where sometimes a figure can come with an accessory, then it can't? What is this process, and how in the world do, well, toy brand managers and designers deal with this in order to deliver a product that's going to have quality and value to the consumer? All right, well, the thing is, the whole process is backwards. It starts at the end and then works its way forward. Well, sort of. All right, let me explain. By backwards, I mean any toy that you have, and this relates to consumer products as a whole, it's all based on how retailers SKU items in the store to make it easy for people to shop, which means most of the time, especially at big box retail, you find product organized in a planogram, meaning a set organized way of putting the product so the less expensive SKUs are at the top, the mid-price in the middle, and then the what are called under-the-tree birthday present price point at the bottom, usually the playset or the large vehicle. So once toys are designed for a planogram, you know what your target costs are based on the SRP, the suggested retail price. So those items at the top, which are your basic entry level, that price point is meant to be appealing as a sort of gateway product. You're not going to start with the castle or the dream house or the giant vehicle. You're usually going to start by getting a low-priced item, understand the price and the value, and then trade up as you get more and more items in a brand. All prices tend to be standardized so that retail can skew the items, and because they're sold into retail way early in the process. Now, all of this backs into what's called a profit margin. I'm not going to give a whole business, 101, but profit margin is essentially the difference between what it costs to make something and what you sell it for. So the manufacturer makes its margin, its profit, selling to a wholesaler like Target. Target makes its margin, or Walmart, by taking the price they bought it from a manufacturer like Hasbro Mattel and now reselling it, hence a retailer, to a customer. All right, to simplify all this, let's say you have a $19.99 SRP, suggested retail price, product that's going to be $20 and has to offer the consumer $20 of value. There's a certain expectation there just based on consumer shopping. Well, as a rough ball estimate, a toy should cost the manufacturer about 25% of the SRP. So if you have your $20 action figure, which sad is the day those don't exist anymore, that means roughly the figure is going to cost $5 to manufacture. Then you would sell it to a retailer for maybe about $10, and then they sell it for $20. There's the margins between that. Now that's just very rough. I'm giving examples here, rounding. Let's look at a $20, now $25 example of a figure. So a Marvel Legends basic figure, in this case, Firestar. All right, Firestar wasn't sold at retail, was a fan club exclusive, but works perfectly to represent what a $20 retail figure would be, right? It has to have the same target costing as a retail figure because it has to give the same amount of value. So it works perfectly as a good example. In this case, you just get a little doggy instead of a Build-A-Figure piece, but more or less the same amount of product. So let's look what's in Firestar. Well, you start off, you have paper. You also have raw plastic. The toy is made of melted down plastic, which starts off like this. And you have paint. This is basically what your toy is made of and your only options for removing things if you're over cost. Of course, you also have labor, assembly, and the more articulation, the more labor, the more cost, but that's sort of a whole separate issue. Let's just talk about the raw cost. If you have soft goods like a cape or a tunic, you've also got that cost. And of course, electronics, if you have anything from batteries to lights, you've got that. Fortunately, our example doesn't have fabric, soft goods, or lights and sounds electronics, so we can just deal with plastic, paint, and paper, trying to go with something simple. So those are your options of things to remove if you're over cost. If the figure costs more than is mandated by a large company for that price point. All right, if you're a little confused, let me see if I can recap. So if we have our $20 item, we have to manufacture it for $5. That means only $5 of paint, plastic, and paper can go in. So if you have someone like Stinkor, who is planned to be a figure, let's say, same thing, $5, and winds up costing $5.70, you then have to remove 70 cents from the figure. And one of the easiest ways to do this is to remove deco. A great example of this is the original G.I. Joe All-American Hero line. When it launched with its original assortment, one figure stood out because he had no deco, Snake Eyes. Back then, entire assortments had costing as opposed to individual figures. So all of the deco was removed from Snake Eyes in order to give that to the other figures in the assortment. He wasn't all black to be stealthy and cool, he was black to be less expensive to make. He sacrificed all of his deco for the other figures. All right, so why can't a company then just take a financial hit, right? If a figure is overcost by 70 cents or 20 cents, why remove accessories, deco, the poor little doggy, just to get the figure onto the target cost? Why can't you just include everything? Let's say, as an example, Firestar was supposed to include a book of matches. Obviously, she wasn't. All right, but that book of matches to recreate her actual superpowers, well, besides being dangerous and a bad idea, puts the figure over cost. So you now have to reduce cost. Well, do you remove the extra accessory, in this case, a book of matches? Again, we're being sarcastic to drive the point home. No one's going to include matches with a toy. All right. Okay, so for funsies, let's recreate a phone call, right, between a Mattel stockholder and Mattel, or Hasbro, or Jax, any of the large toy companies. And I suppose see what it would be like if the toy had to be cost reduced. Oh, yes, hello. This is Sally Stockholder here. How can I help you? I'm good at investing in companies. Well, yes, this is Mr. Manufacturer here. We have a product, a toy, that we'd like to include an extra accessory in. Of course, it's over cost, and it means you'll be making 10% less on your next dividend purchase. But it's worth it to make the toy that much better. Does the toy have to have this? Will it work without it? Oh, well, yes, it will. Well, then fine, forget it. Why should you cost more? Well, because it would be fun. It would show the fans that we really love them. Yes, but I would make less money, and I fund your company. Without me, you wouldn't have a company. All right. Yeah, okay, so I'm having a little fun with that, but that's what it's like when you have a large company. With Todd McFarlane, who has a private company, he doesn't have this issue. So if he goes over cost with a figure, he just eats the cost. He can do that because he owns the company. When you are publicly owned, you can't do that because the stockholders run the company, and they're not going to allow you to do that. That's why they have set prices so that they know how much money they're making from their investment. Now, one thing that's an exception to this rule is when you have items where you take a retail item that meets that cost target and then plus it up for a convention. Hasbro does this all the time, like they did with this Emperor Palpatine figure last year. So this figure is not sold at retail, so it doesn't have cost targets. You could basically do whatever you want with this toy because it's sold directly at a convention. It's one of the reasons I love convention slots. It always let you sort of do more with, I guess, your design work. If you're buying it directly from a company, it also cuts out the margin that they would have to pay to a retailer because they can absorb that margin. So you wind up better for the company, there's more money for the product, it's better for the fans. It's one of the reasons convention items are something I really love working on. You get a lot more freedom, and you don't have to often worry about having to cost reduce things and walk across that great gap between company required profit and obligation to your customer. never easy. It is always a tightrope walk, but a good brand manager knows how to do it, and great brand managers do it without even making you realize it. All right, I hope this video at least cleared up what costing means, and when you hear something getting costed out of a figure or costed in, now you know. And knowing's half the battle. The other half is sharing this video. Please do that. It helps this channel a ton.